Join the coven. I Hunt Reverse Vampires 2. A story written by Cecily 1987. Where did I leave you off? Oh right, we got whacked by those mask-wearing monsters. There were 3 of them, and they took us out like we were nothing. It was like we were a JV team going up against professionals. Professionals getting paid millions to do what they do. Voss was shot to pieces. Mika took a rocket to the face, and I had my throat slit. We all died. But somehow we were all back behind cover, protecting the fenced-in grave with the madame inside. After throwing up, I heard similar gagging and vomiting from across the way, where Monroe's red shirt bodyguard and Voss were taking cover. Whatever crazy magic affected us seemed to have affected them also. The witch, the priestess, must have brought us back, I told Mika, but it was also a question for her to confirm for me. Mika knew way more about this magic stuff than any of us right now. Letty in the bridge, Mika stated. Voss's mother knew we would get killed. She wanted Monroe to perform a specific spell to save us. At the mention of Voss's mother, I remembered the feeling of grief and paternal anger when he was killed in front of me. Had I been possessed? I had called him my son. Wait, I said out loud, another thought derailing my current pondering. Bodyguard guy, the cool one, is he alive? My hopes spiked as I peeked over at the gravestone where I'd last seen the cool bodyguard before the top of his head was blown off. To my dismay, he was still there, with the top of his head still missing. My disappointment was immeasurable. Hey, why didn't you bring your boy back? I yelled to the madame kneeling by the concrete grave inside the fenced-in area. I could see she was shaking and drawing patterns on the ground with her finger. She looked up at me, and when her eyes locked, I felt a brain zap behind my eyes. It was similar to the feeling of being taken over by Voss's ghost mom, but not as jarring. It was like I could feel her in my mind, like an angry tutor standing over me watching my work. I activated the spell after Patrick was killed, Monroe said, her voice bouncing around in my head. Now all of you, listen up, her voice continued. I looked around to see she had grabbed all of our attention as we watched her speak to us without her lips moving. Voss had a dumb look on his face as he put his hand to his ear. He was bewildered why it didn't muffle out Monroe's voice. The spell, Mika told me, Letty in the bridge, is a spell I've activated right now. It is a very complex and dangerous spell that almost locked me and my older sister in a perpetual time loop back in our younger days. The time loop idea made sense to me. Well, it was the only thing that made the most sense in a world that had gone crazy on me. So, was it like some sort of Groundhog Day situation? No, not like that damn movie, Monroe said with annoyance. That's when she realized the mental communication was 2 ways. It draws from my very life force to reset the clock. We can only travel backwards in time in short bursts. I have long prepared and personalized this cemetery to amplify and enhance my power. But even with the extra help, if I have to bring all of you back from the dead again, it will surely kill me. There was a pause as we all stared at Madame Monroe. She was panting and covered in sweat, nose bleeding. It was obvious the spell had already taken a heavy toll on her physically. Say it out loud for the rest of the class, child. She spoke loudly in her real voice, directing an annoyed look at Mika. Oh, sorry, Mika stuttered. I was only wondering if the 3 killers out there were also aware of the time loop or not. If they were unaware of what's happening, we can use this to our advantage. No, Madame Monroe's voice said in my head again. I guess it was easier for her to use ESP to communicate with us, rather than having to exert herself by speaking out loud. They do not remember the last timeline, the one in which they killed all of you. We have a second chance to turn the tables on them. This new information bounces around between all of our brains for a bit, before Voss spoke up. All right, we know there are 3 of them. Their ruse was to make us overconfident. They needed us to reveal ourselves and be sideswiped. Voss made eye contact with all of us before continuing. We go in like we did before, except Mika goes with Taylor. Voss pointed at Mika. You fire off some shots from your position right there. Then sneak away to flank the road with Taylor, said Voss, motioning to me. Me and Monroe's man will continue like before. When we start taking fire, we will all fall back, hopefully drawing my killer into the open to be shot by crossfire from where you 2 are hiding. Okay, I said, that's 1 down. What about the other 2? Voss looked flustered and continued angrily. We can deal with that once we put them on the back foot. They are in control of this battlefield right now. Mika opened her mouth to ridicule or compliment Voss's plan. It was impossible to tell, because multiple rock-sized objects landed between us, bouncing off the fence or cracking against a headstone. It only took us a second to realize the objects were some sort of grenades being thrown at us. Blinding lights ricocheted off my skull with a bang as I staggered away from cover. My eardrums screamed and I readied my weapon. I could barely hear Voss's voice calling over the confusion. Here! He is right here! I blinked away the sunspots and twirled towards Voss and Red Shirt Guy to see the blurry outline of Voss grappling with somebody. As my eyesight cleared, I saw the attacker was one of the wolf mercenaries, and they were fighting over a weapon between them. Red Shirt bleeding on the ground, a perfect hole in his forehead. I tried to get a clear shot on the wolf as they wrestled back and forth. The jerk was doing a good job keeping Voss between us. Voss got the upper hand for a moment and slammed his attacker against the crypt wall with a crack. I had only an instant to squeeze off around to pop the merce in his shiny metal mask. With a loud ting, the bullet rocked his head backwards. The mercenary never let go of the weapon between them, and brought his head arcing back into headbutt Voss with a devastating crack. The wolf grappled the staggered Voss close again, leveraging his body as a shield between us. I saw my .556 round had no effect penetrating the mask, even at close range. I needed something with more penetrating power. As if reading my mind, I heard Mika yell, "Taylor, down!" I dropped down and Mika's rifle let off a sharp bang above my head, causing a perfect black dot to appear in above the right eye of the masked attacker. The wolf dropped like a sack of potatoes, crumpling up on himself and falling backwards. Voss looked back in surprise and with a little outrage. Mika had made her shot, only missing his head by an inch. "Oh, forget about it, pretty boy," Mika snapped back at his look. "We would have brought you back if I had missed. Now destroy his brain before he heals back up." I saw Voss look down and remove a giant knife strapped to the boot of the downed mercenary. I smiled a grim smile at the thought of the jerk getting decapitated by his own knife. But I should have been paying attention to my surroundings instead. This was a fatal mistake. I heard a terrible choking sound coming from behind me, and I knew it was Mika. I spun around to see the horror with my own eyes. A second mercenary was standing behind Mika with his combat knife in her throat. Her mouth gaped wide and she stared at me bug-eyed as blood gushed out of her open wound. I whipped up my AR to take aim at her attacker, quicker than I could get a clear shot. He pulled the knife out and threw it at me. It spun end over end to sink deeply into my right shoulder. I dropped my rifle and fell backwards. I watched the lifeblood spout out of Mika's neck wound as her killer pulled a pistol from a drop holster on his bag. He took aim at my head, but with one last burst of defiance, Mika reached out to grapple his outstretched arm. She curled up like a ball, hugging his arm to her chest and letting herself fall to the ground. She pulled him down to be bent over. I knew she was seconds away from death, but the girl was using it to give my bud a chance. I was on my back now, so I rolled onto the side to awkwardly grab at my rifle with my left hand. I pulled it up on top of me and closed my legs like I was sitting on a chair. I propped the barrel of the rifle over my bent legs to get its crosshairs on the bent Merce. I began squeezing shots off in rapid succession. He was only 2 meters away from me, so hitting him wasn't difficult. I was putting out so much lead so fast that something had to hit him. I know some shots went wide, and at least one hit Mika's crumpled body. But more hit him. He jerked and grunted as his black armor was torn away. I didn't think it would be enough. Yes, some of the round penetrated his armor, but he was a fast healing mauve. Another sound of gunfire joined mine as Voss began shooting at the same baddie from behind me. The dude knew he was losing and pulled a pin on his grenade. Voss shot him in the arm, and he dropped the grenade at his feet. It went off in a brilliant flash, once again disorienting me. My mag ran dry as my vision returned. I spotted the mercenary a dozen feet away, bleeding and crawling backwards on his hands and butt. As he crawls up to the corner of a large crypt, I saw the third and final wolf mercenary lean out to pull his buddy behind cover. I looked behind me to see Voss dropping a spent mag and slapping in another. He looked at me and ran to grab me by my shirt collar. "We gotta find cover," he said as he began pulling my butt across the grass, away from the recuperating enemies. Voss was pulling me with one arm and his rifle slung. I saw that 2 of the fingers on his right hand were broken to bend in unnatural directions. He was nursing it close to his body, and his face was twisted in pain. As we slid into the shadow of a gravestone, I could see the one Mika had shot starting to stir and sit up. This wasn't good. Mika was dead. I had a knife sticking out of my shoulder, and Voss was the only one to carry the team. But all 3 of our attackers were still in the game. In a couple of minutes, they would be back on their feet. I had to do something. "We gotta retreat," Voss said down to me in a shaky voice as he leaned against the concrete barrier of the crypt. "I'll hold them off, and you get Monroe and run back to the van." Voss was peeking around the corner and not looking at me until he heard me let out a grunt of pain. He looked down at me for the first time and was surprised to see tears streaming from my eyes as I held the bloody knife I had pulled out of my shoulder. "I can't lose anyone else," I said. The tears had snuck up on me, ambushing me just as surely as the enemy had. "We will all make it out. You, me, and Mika," I cried. "I'll make Monroe understand, but you have to buy me time." I swiped the blade of the knife across Voss's chest. He let out a cry of shock, but quickly realized what I had done. It was a light cut. It only cut the skin, breaking the seal on his chest. 10 minutes, I said to him as he looked at me with a grim understanding. An instant later, he growled and gritted his teeth as a vein began to protrude in his neck. The heart and anger of his mother had been set free. Voss let out a scream of pain and frustration. He grabbed the top of the crypt we had hidden against. In a pull-up motion, he launched himself up and over the 6-foot-high barrier. He moved so quick it reminded me of a jack-in-the-box springing out to terrorize a child. Seconds later, I heard the deep, muffled voice of one of the mercenaries shout out in surprise. "Contact! Contact!" the merc said, quickly followed by the sound of gunfire. I knew Voss would keep his word and keep all the three of them busy. But these guys were very capable of offing Voss, even in his Super Saiyan form. I had to work fast. I tried to keep my blood from escaping out of the newly created hole in my shoulder. I stumbled over and caught myself on the fence, facing the meditating Monroe. "You have to bring them back. You have to rewind. Go back to the last checkpoint," I blabbered as I stared at her. "I don't have the strength to do that," Monroe answered with strain in her voice. "I can roll you back to the last checkpoint, but cheating death again will cost my body a lot. It is a taboo to interrupt death's finality." I thought for a moment. Gunfire and screams echoing off graves as Voss fought tooth and nail against our killers. 10 minutes was a big ask. Voss would burn out or be killed before then. I could feel the hand of time clicking slowly towards our second and final death. "Just bring back Mika. Heal Voss's chest. Can you do that?" I asked desperately. "Yes, but just barely. You will overburden me." Monroe took a break in talking to swallow hard, sweat beading on her forehead. "Inverting 3 of you back to the beginning would be too difficult, and I still don't think I can bring Mika back." "Then let me in the gate with you. You didn't change. You are unaffected by time's reversal." "How do you know that?" Monroe asked in surprise, opening her eyes for the first time to look at me. "Your nose was bleeding during our first round. When we died and came back, you still had it. Now it's starting to bleed from the other nostril." "Clever boy," the madame croaked at me in a dry voice. "I was foolish to look down on the 3 of you. You will have to sacrifice a part of yourself to bring back your female friend. Is that fine with you?" "Yes," I blurted, equivalent exchange and all that alchemist stuff. "I get it. Now let me in." "I will, but bring me something from our attackers." "I have an idea," Monroe said. I looked at the bloody knife that had been hurled into my shoulder. That would do, but I needed something from the others. Monroe screamed and fell forward to weakly hold herself on trembling hands. I felt the familiar wave of hate wash over me. I felt the maternal need to charge off into the graves to exact revenge from my son. Even before Monroe told me, I knew Voss was dead. We were out of time. I looked down at the ground to see the scorched grass from when the flashbangs exploded. I stumbled over to scoop up some metal fragments. Hopefully this would be enough for whatever kind of voodoo she had planned. "All right, let me in," I said as I stumbled back to the gate. Monroe was drawing some sort of design in the grass. "Just walk through," she said, annoyed, her eyes shut tight. "What?" I stuttered. "Phase through it. I lowered the barrier for you," she screamed at me. I pushed on the black metal gate, expecting my hand to go through like I was a ghost. But nothing happened. "This ain't Harry Potter, boy. Push on it, and you will yourself through. Even an idiot like you can figure this out." I did as told. I was confused on the madame's true feelings towards me. Didn't she just compliment me? But I made my way through the metal gate. It was like pushing through Play-Doh that formed back up when you weren't touching. Once on the inside with Monroe, my ears popped, like I was in a different altitude. The surroundings outside the fence looked blurry, with multiple versions of us moving forward, running in reverse, dying and reviving. It hurt my head to watch. Looking out of the gated area gave me intense vertigo and nausea. Everything looked like a VHS security tape that had multiple recordings running at once. "Look at the ground before you suffer a seizure," Monroe yelled at me once again. "You're no good to me if you suffer time-displaced psychosis." I did as she commanded and looked down at my feet. I waddled over to her and knelt by the above-ground coffin, dropping the bloody knife and metal fragments in front of her. "To roll back time again, revive your girl, and curse the 3 wolves, I will need a lot from you," she said sternly, opening her eyes to look into mine. "Whatever it takes," I whispered sharply. "Bring her back so we can kill them." This is where my part ends. I was pretty useless from this point on. I'll have to get somebody else to give the deeds on the rest of the story. Until next time.